Important notice. This is a fictional story created for entertainment. All characters and events are imaginary. Found my daughter unconscious in the hallway. My sister shrugged and said, "I just disciplined her a little. I should have noticed something was wrong when my daughter stopped hugging me." It was December 22nd, the eve of the year-end company break, and I was at the office reviewing the last quarterly reports. My phone rang 3 times in a row, but I was too focused on the numbers on the screen to answer. It was just Sophie and me now. After Marcus decided that his new life in Miami was more important than the 13-year-old daughter he left behind, my cell phone rang again. This time, I looked. My mother. I answered on the 4th ring. "Hi, Mom. Jennifer. When are you coming home?" Her voice had that tone of disapproval I'd known since childhood. "Sophie has been here alone with your sister for hours. I said I'd stay late today. There's still a lot of pending work before the holiday. There's always pending work with you." She sighed. "Graciela is taking care of her. Don't worry. But it would be nice if you paid more attention to your daughter from time to time." I swallowed the bitter response that rose in my throat. My mother had always had the gift of making me feel inadequate with just one sentence. Since Graciela, my younger sister, offered to stay with me for a few weeks to help, my mother hadn't missed an opportunity to compare our maternal capabilities. The fact that Graciela didn't have children of her own didn't seem to diminish her supposed expertise. "I'll leave in an hour," I promised. "Tell Sophie I'll be there soon." I hung up before she could add more guilt to the conversation. The office was quiet that night. Most colleagues had already left early, taking advantage of the year-end flexibility. But I needed to finish that analysis. The promotion I'd been waiting for 3 years was finally within my reach, and I couldn't give room for slip-ups. Marcus used to complain about this. "You love your work more than us," he'd say, before leaving home for good, as if working hard to support the family was a character flaw. I finished the report at 9 at night. The building was almost empty when I left. Just the night security guard and a cleaning crew on the upper floors. The parking lot was dark and cold, my breath creating small clouds in the frigid December air. Traffic was surprisingly light. 20 minutes later, I was entering the elevator of my building, tired but satisfied to have finished everything before the deadline. The 5th-floor hallway stretched before me, lit by cold ceiling lights. My apartment was at the end, number 512. I started walking, searching for my keys in my purse. That's when I saw it. A dark form on the floor, leaning against my door. My heart raced. I started running, my heels echoing in the silent hallway. With each step, the details became clearer. Dark hair spread on the beige carpet. A blouse I recognized. The blue one with stars that Sophie had gotten for her birthday. "Sophie!" The scream came hoarse from my throat. I fell to my knees beside her. My daughter was lying on her side, one arm extended toward the door as if she had tried to reach the doorknob. Her face was pale, lips slightly bluish. There was dried blood at the corner of her mouth. My hands trembled when I touched her neck, searching for a pulse. For an endless second, I felt nothing. Then, weak but present, the light pulse of life under my fingers. "Sophie, wake up. Please, wake up." The apartment door opened. Graciela appeared in the doorway, wearing yoga pants and a comfortable t-shirt, holding a glass of red wine. She looked at me, then at Sophie on the floor, and shrugged. "Oh, you arrived?" she said in a too casual voice, as if commenting on the weather. "I was wondering how long you'd take. What happened?" My voice came out as a growl. "What did you do to my daughter?" "I didn't do anything she didn't deserve." Graciela took a sip of wine, leaning against the doorframe. "The girl has a terrible mouth, Jennifer. Lack of education, lack of respect. Someone needed to set boundaries." My mother appeared behind Graciela, and my father right behind her. They looked at Sophie on the floor with the same indifference my sister showed. "You exaggerate, Jennifer," my mother said. "Children fall. Children get hurt. You don't need to make such a big scene. She's unconscious." My voice echoed through the hallway. "There's blood in her mouth. She's freezing." My father sighed, as if I were a stubborn child complaining about something trivial. "Graciela was just disciplining the girl. You work too much. You're not present. Someone needs to teach Sophie to behave." I grabbed my cell phone with trembling hands and dialed 192. The operator answered on the second ring, and I began explaining between sobs that my daughter was unconscious, that I needed help immediately. "You're calling an ambulance?" Graciela raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Because of this? Get out of my way, I growled. Get out now or I swear that… You'll do what? She approached, facing me. Hit me? In front of our parents? You've always been so dramatic, Jenny. Always turning small problems into tragedies. The SAMU operator asked me questions I answered on autopilot. Yes. She was breathing. No. I didn't know how long she'd been unconscious. Yes. There were signs of trauma. Please, come quickly. I took off my coat and covered Sophie with it. Her skin was too cold. Her face too pale. How had I not noticed? How had I let this happen? The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later, but it felt like 7 hours. 2 men and 1 woman, carrying equipment and moving with professional efficiency. The woman, a paramedic in her 40s with hair pulled back in a tight bun, knelt beside Sophie. What happened? She asked, checking my daughter's vital signs. I came home and found her like this, in the hallway. The paramedic lifted Sophie's eyelid, shining a small flashlight in her eyes. How long has she been unconscious? I don't know. I was at work. One of the male paramedics began immobilizing Sophie's neck with a cervical collar. The woman carefully examined her head, her fingers finding something that made her expression change. Head trauma, she murmured to her colleagues. Significant swelling in the occipital region. Graciela was still at the door, watching everything with an expression of mild interest, like someone watching a mediocre TV show. The paramedic looked at her, then at me, then at her again. Her expression changed. Professionalism gave way to something more personal, more alarmed. You, she said, pointing at Graciela. What's your name? Graciela Moreno, my sister answered with a smile. Why? The paramedic stood slowly, not taking her eyes off Graciela. She approached me, lowering her voice. Ma'am, I need to ask a question. Is this woman really your sister? Yes. Why? The paramedic looked back, making sure her colleagues were taking care of Sophie. Because I've seen this face before. 3 years ago, in Curitiba. I attended a case of a 9-year-old child with head trauma and several fractures. The aunt was caring for her while the mother worked. My stomach churned. And? The aunt's name was Ana Paula Ferreira, but the face was exactly the same. Identical. She swallowed hard. The child almost died. The case went to the police, but when they went to get the aunt for questioning, she had disappeared. The family vanished. I looked at Graciela, who continued at the door with that slight smile on her face. My sister, the person I had left to care for my daughter. There's more, the paramedic continued, her voice almost a whisper. When the case reached the authorities, they discovered there was another similar case in Florianopolis, 2 years earlier. Same situation. Woman caring for child seriously injured, woman disappearing before she could be questioned. My knees weakened. The paramedic held me by the arm. The colleagues are taking your daughter to San Lucas Hospital. You need to come with us, but you also need to call the police. Now. Sophie was placed on the stretcher with extreme care. Her head was immobilized, a cervical collar around her neck. I followed the team to the elevator, my mind spinning in impossible circles. Graciela watched everything from the door, taking another sip of wine. Exaggerated, I heard my mother murmur. Always so dramatic. In the elevator, alone with the paramedics and my unconscious daughter, I started trembling. The paramedic who had warned me placed her hand on my shoulder. Breathe. Your daughter is going to need you strong now. How did I not notice? The words came out broken. How did I let this happen? People like that are experts at deceiving, she said gently. They know exactly how to act, what to say, how to seem trustworthy. It's not your fault. But it felt like it was. It felt completely my fault. The ambulance rushed through the city streets, sirens cutting through the cold December night. I held Sophie's cold hand, praying to gods I didn't even believe in. Please, please, don't take her from me. At the hospital, an entire team was waiting. Sophie was immediately taken to the emergency room. A nurse guided me to a waiting room with uncomfortable plastic chairs and old magazines. The doctor will come talk to you as soon as possible, she said with professional kindness. I was left alone in that room, still wearing my work suit, my purse clutched against my chest. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. Less than an hour ago, I was at the office worried about reports and promotions. My phone rang. My mother. I didn't answer. It rang again. Graciela. I hung up and blocked the number. A message appeared from an unknown number. You've always been too weak. The girl needs discipline, not pampering. I showed the message to the nurse at reception, who immediately called security. A guard appeared, wrote everything down, and said he would contact the police. They're already on their way, he informed. The paramedic who brought your daughter filed a report. 2 hours passed, or maybe it was 20 minutes. Time had lost meaning. Finally, a doctor appeared, a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. Mrs. Moreno? Yes. I jumped up. My daughter, how is she? Stable at the moment. She suffered severe head trauma. There's cerebral edema, but the tests don't show active bleeding, which is good. He paused. We also found other injuries. Fractured ribs in different stages of healing. Bruises on various parts of the body, some recent, others old. Marks indicating repeated assault over weeks, possibly months. My legs gave out. The doctor held me, guiding me back to the chair. How long has your sister been living with you? He asked gently. 6 weeks. My voice came out in a hoarse whisper. She said she had lost her job and needed a place to stay while looking for something new. And at any point did you notice changes in your daughter's behavior? I closed my eyes, forcing my memory to work through the shock. Sophie had become quieter in recent weeks. She who used to be chatty, always telling stories from school, had started responding in monosyllables. I had attributed this to adolescence, hormones, grief over her father's absence. She became more withdrawn, I admitted. But I thought it was normal. Abused children frequently hide the abuse, the doctor said, especially when the abuser convinces them they deserve it, or that no one will believe them. The word abused hit me like a punch to the stomach. Can I see her? She's still sedated. We'll keep her like this for the next 12 to 24 hours to give the brain time to recover. But yes, you can visit her. Just can't stay too long each time. He led me through white hallways that smelled of antiseptic to an intensive care unit. Sophie was in a small room, surrounded by machines that beeped and monitors showing numbers I didn't understand. She looked so small in that bed, so fragile. I approached and held her hand. It was warmer now, but still lifeless. No response. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered. Sorry for not noticing. Sorry for not protecting you. The machines continued their rhythmic beeps. Sophie remained motionless. A police officer entered the room 20 minutes later. She was a woman in her 30s, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. Serious but kind expression. Mrs. Moreno? I'm Detective Cardoso. I need to ask some questions about what happened tonight. I told her everything. Finding Sophie in the hallway. Graciela's indifferent reaction. My parents' comments. The paramedic's revelation about similar cases in other cities. The detective wrote everything down in a small notebook. We went to your apartment. There was no one there. Your parents and your sister disappeared. Disappeared? The apartment was empty. Some clothes missing from the guest room. We found your parents' car leaving the garage about 40 minutes after the ambulance left. She closed the notebook. We'll issue a search warrant. We'll also investigate your sister's history in other cities. The paramedic said she used another name. Yes, we're already checking that. If your sister has a pattern of changing identity in city after incidents with children, we need to find out how many other cases there are. After the detective left, I was alone with Sophie again. I grabbed my phone and for the first time in 3 years, called Marcus. He answered on the 4th ring, sleepy voice. Jennifer, it's almost midnight. What? Sophie is in the hospital. My voice came out flat, without emotion. Your sister beat her and left her unconscious in the hallway. Silence on the other end. Then, what? I told everything again, each word like glass in my throat. Marcus was silent for a long moment after I finished. I'll catch the first flight tomorrow, he finally said. Jesus, Jennifer, our baby you haven't seen in 8 months, I responded bitterly. Our baby you forgot on her birthday, at Christmas, on Children's Day. I know, and I'm a piece of shit. But she's my daughter too. I'll be there tomorrow. I hung up without responding. The night dragged on. Nurses came and went, checking Sophie's monitors, adjusting medications. I didn't sleep, just sat in that uncomfortable chair, holding my daughter's hand and trying not to think about all the signs I had ignored. Sophie complaining about rib pain that I attributed to a fall at school. Sophie wearing long-sleeved shirts even in the heat. Sophie eating less and less at dinner. Sophie having nightmares and waking up screaming, sweating cold, afraid of something she couldn't or wouldn't explain. I had attributed everything to adolescence, to grief over her father's absence, to school stress. Never, not for a second, did I consider that my own sister could be hurting my daughter. Dawn broke gray through the hospital window. The city was waking up out there. People going to work, living their normal lives. And I was trapped in this nightmare. The doctor returned at 7 a.m. We'll start reducing sedation in the next few hours. If all goes well, she should wake up by the end of the day. And if it doesn't go well, let's hope it does. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Your daughter is strong. The tests show normal brain activity. That's a good sign. Marcus arrived at the hospital at 10 a.m, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He looked at Sophie in the bed and his eyes filled with tears. My God, he whispered. My baby. We stayed together in that small room, united for the first time in years by terror and guilt. Neither of us said much. There were no words for this. At noon, Detective Cardoso returned with news. We found your parents trying to cross the border into Uruguay. They were detained. Your sister wasn't with them. Where is she? They don't know. Or don't want to say. The detective sighed. But we found something interesting investigating her history. Graciela Moreno is just one of at least 4 identities she's used over the last 10 years. She opened a folder, showing photos. My sister with different hair, different colors, but always the same face. Ana Paula Ferreira in Curitiba, Mariana Costa in Florianopolis, Carolina Mendez in Porto Alegre. In each city, the same pattern. She approaches single mothers with small children, offers help, gains trust. Then, weeks or months later, the child appears seriously injured. Graciela disappears before authorities can investigate properly. How many children? I asked, feeling bile rise in my throat. That we've been able to confirm so far? 7. But there could be more. 7 children. 7 families destroyed. And I had let her into my house, into my daughter's life. Were your parents aware? Marcus asked. We're investigating, but it seems so. Regular bank transfers, always after Graciela changed cities. Emails discussing problems and new beginnings. They helped her escape. At 3 p.m, Sophie started moving. Her fingers twitched against mine. Her eyelids trembled. Sophie. I leaned over her. Baby, can you hear me? Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. She looked around the room, at the monitors, at the IV in her arm. Panic crossed her face. Where? Her voice came out hoarse, scratchy. Where is she? Who, baby? Aunt Graciela. Tears started running down Sophie's face. She's going to be angry. I shouldn't be here. She said if I told anyone, it would be worse. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She's not here. She can't hurt you anymore. You're safe. Sophie started crying for real then, sobs shaking her small body. Marcus and I hugged her, careful with the tubes and monitors, holding our broken daughter while she finally let out everything she'd been holding in. And I knew, in that moment, that this was just beginning. Physical recovery would be long. Emotional recovery would be even longer. But at least now, finally, I was paying attention. Sophie spent 5 days in the hospital. 5 days of tests, monitors, doctors coming and going with carefully neutral expressions. 5 days of Marcus and me taking turns by her bedside, trying to reclaim years of absence and stolen hours. On the 3rd day, a child psychologist came to talk with Sophie. Dr. Helena Ribeiro was a small woman, about 60 years old, with completely white hair and kind eyes behind round glasses. She asked to speak with Sophie alone. I waited outside, pacing back and forth in the hallway, biting my nails until they bled. Marcus was in the cafeteria, unable to bear the tension of waiting. After an hour and a half, the door finally opened. Dr. Helena signaled for me to come in. Sophie was curled up in the bed, hugging one of the hospital pillows, eyes red from crying. Your daughter was very brave today, the psychologist said, sitting in the chair beside the bed. She told me some important things. With her permission, I'd like to share the basics with you. I looked at Sophie. She nodded weakly, not meeting my eyes. From what Sophie told me, the abuse began about 2 weeks after your sister moved into your house. Initially, it was verbal criticism about her appearance, her grades, her way of speaking. Then they progressed to punishments. My stomach contracted. What kind of punishments? Standing in the corner for hours, skipping meals, being locked in the bathroom. Dr. Helena consulted her notes. Physical violence began about 3 weeks ago. First slaps, then punches and kicks when Sophie tried to defend herself or question. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out before I could contain them. Sophie shrank even more. It's not that simple. Dr. Helena shot me a warning look. Graciela was very careful. She told Sophie you wouldn't believe her, that you'd be angry, that you'd blame Sophie for causing problems. She also threatened to hurt Sophie even more if she told. She said you had already abandoned me once, Sophie murmured, looking at her hands. When you let Dad leave, she said if I caused more problems, you'd send me to live with him and his new woman, that you'd be happy to get rid of me. Hot tears ran down my face. Sophie, I would never. I know. She finally looked at me, and there was so much pain in those young eyes. I know now, but at the time, she was so convincing, Mom. She said she was helping me become a better person, that you had asked her to discipline me because you didn't have time. Graciela had played with all my fears, all my insecurities as a single working mother. She had turned my necessary absence into a weapon against my own daughter. Did your grandparents also participate? Dr. Helena asked gently. Sophie nodded. Grandma held my arms once, when I tried to run. She said it was for my own good, that children today have no discipline. Her voice got smaller. Grandpa just stood there watching. He never did anything, but he also never stopped it. Detective Cardoso needed to hear this. I took out my cell phone and sent her a message, asking her to come to the hospital as soon as possible. Sophie, Dr. Helena said softly, what happened the night your mother found you in the hallway? My daughter closed her eyes, breathing deeply. I was washing the dinner dishes. Aunt Graciela had made pasta, but only she, Grandma, and Grandpa ate. I couldn't eat because I had talked back earlier. Talked back how? I asked. She asked why my math grades had dropped. I said I was finding it difficult. She said it was because I was lazy and stupid. Sophie opened her eyes, looking at the ceiling. I said I wasn't stupid. That was talking back. I remained silent, letting her tell it at her own pace. While I was washing the dishes, I dropped a plate. It slipped from my hand because it had soap on it. It broke on the floor. Her breathing accelerated. Aunt Graciela was furious. She screamed that I had done it on purpose, that I was careless, that I was worthless. Dr. Helena placed a hand on Sophie's arm, anchoring her. She grabbed me by the hair and slammed my head into the sink, twice. I saw stars. Everything got blurry. When I fell on the floor, she kicked me in the ribs. Grandma told her to stop, not because it was wrong, but because you were going to arrive soon and might see. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a sob. Aunt Graciela dragged me to the apartment door and pushed me outside. She said I could come back when I learned not to be a burden. She locked the door in my face. Sophie touched the bandage on her head. I tried to knock on the door, apologize, beg to come in, but everything started spinning, and then I don't remember anything else until waking up here. The silence that followed was dense, heavy with horrors that words couldn't adequately express. You were unconscious in the hallway for at least 40 minutes, I said, my voice trembling, in the cold, alone, bleeding, and they just left you there. Grandma looked through the door once, Sophie added. I heard her say, she's still out there, and Aunt Graciela responded, leave her, she'll learn. In that moment, I felt a hatred so pure, so absolute for my family that it scared me. Those people I had loved, trusted, allowed into my life, they had tortured my daughter and watched her almost die without a shred of remorse. Dr. Helena spent the next half hour explaining what would come next. Intensive therapy for Sophie, possibly for years. She would have to process not just the physical trauma, but the emotional betrayal of people who should have protected her. PTSD was practically guaranteed. Nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety, all of this would be part of recovery. But she's strong, the psychologist said, looking at Sophie with genuine admiration. And now she has what she didn't have before, a mother who believes her and is fighting for her. That makes all the difference. When Dr. Helena left, I sat on the bed next to Sophie and hugged her carefully, conscious of her still recovering ribs. I'm sorry, I whispered into her hair. Sorry for not seeing. Sorry for bringing her into our house. Sorry for all the times I chose work instead of you. You didn't know," Sophie said against my shoulder. She was good at pretending. When you were around, she was perfect, affectionate, funny, cool. It was only when we were alone that her voice failed. "Never again," I promised. "Never again will I let anyone hurt you. Never again will I be too absent to notice. You understand me? You're the most important thing in my life, Sophie. You always have been." She cried then, and I cried with her. Two broken hearts trying to find a way back to each other. Marcus entered the room an hour later, bringing sandwiches from the cafeteria that neither of us touched. He had talked with his lawyers in Miami, he informed. He was transferring his work to the São Paulo office. He wasn't going to be an absent father anymore. "Took you long enough," I said, unable to hide the bitterness. "I know." He looked at Sophie, who had fallen asleep exhausted from the therapy session. "I know, and I'll have to live with that. But I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Part of me wanted to scream at him, list all the times he had disappointed our daughter, all the missed birthdays, all the broken promises. But Sophie didn't need more conflict in her life. She needed parents who worked together, even if our marriage was over. "We'll see," was all I could say. Detective Cardoso arrived in the late afternoon, accompanied by a social worker named Beatriz Campos. They listened to the recording Dr. Helena had made of the session with Sophie, with her permission, their expressions becoming darker with each revelation. "Your parents are being formally charged with complicity in child abuse and obstruction of justice," Cardoso informed. "With Sophie's testimony, we can add more charges, but we need to find Graciela." "She just disappeared?" Marcus asked. "Women like her are experienced at disappearing," Beatriz explained. "She probably already had a backup identity ready, hidden money, an established escape plan. She could be anywhere in the country now, or even outside it. But we'll find her," Cardoso added with determination. "We got a federal warrant. Interpol was notified. Her photo is being distributed to all airports, bus stations, borders. She can run, but she can't hide forever." My phone rang. Unknown number. I showed Cardoso, who gestured for me to answer, while turning on her cell phone recorder. "Hello? Hi." "Jenny." Graciela's voice was light, almost cheerful. "I heard Sophie woke up. That's good." My hand squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Where are you?" Now. You know I'm not going to tell you that." She laughed, a crystalline sound completely devoid of remorse. "I just called to say you're exaggerating, as always. The girl needed discipline and you were too busy being the big executive to provide it. You almost killed my daughter. Please. It was an accident. She fell. Children fall all the time." Her voice got colder. "The real problem here is you, Jennifer. It always has been. Absent mother, always putting work first, leaving the most precious thing in your life in the hands of strangers. You're the one to blame here." The words hit exactly where she intended, directly at my deepest insecurities. But Cardoso shook her head vigorously, reminding me not to fall for the manipulation. "The only one to blame here is you," I said, my voice firmer than expected. "You and our parents. And you'll all pay for what you did. Oh, Jenny. Always so dramatic." She sighed. "Mom and Dad were just trying to help. They know how children need to be raised with a firm hand. You were always the rebel, the one who questioned everything. I was the good daughter, remember?" Memories began reorganizing in my mind. Graciela had always been the favorite. Yes, but I had attributed this to her more docile, more agreeable personality. Now hearing her speak, I wondered what else I had ignored during our childhood. "You're going to be arrested," I said. "No matter where you run. Maybe not." She sounded bored now. "But here's the thing, Jenny. Even if they catch me, even if they throw me in prison, I've already won. Because now you'll spend the rest of your life knowing it was you who brought the monster into the house. That it was you who left your little girl alone with someone who loved hurting her. That's going to eat you alive, isn't it?" The call dropped. Cardoso immediately started making calls, trying to trace the origin of the call. But we already knew it would be useless. Graciela was too smart to call from a traceable phone. "She's trying to get in your head," Beatriz said gently. "It's part of her game. Don't let her." But Graciela's words echoed in my mind like poison. because there was truth in them, wasn't there? I had brought her into our house. I had left Sophie alone with her. I had ignored the signs. Mom? Sophie's weak voice came from the bed. She had woken up and was looking at us with wide eyes. Was that her? Yes, baby. But don't worry. The police are tracing the call. Did she say something about me? I hesitated, but Sophie deserved honesty. She tried to make me feel guilty, throw the blame on me instead of accepting responsibility for what she did. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, with a maturity beyond her 13 years, she always does that. Makes you think it's your fault. Makes you think you deserved it. But the therapist said it's not true. The blame is always on the one who hurts, not on the one who was hurt. Out of nowhere, my 13-year-old daughter was giving me lessons about not blaming myself. The world had turned upside down. 2 days later, Sophie was discharged from the hospital. A nurse brought a wheelchair, but Sophie insisted on walking. I'm not an invalid, she said with a hint of her old stubbornness returning. We took her to a new apartment that Marcus and I had hastily rented. We couldn't go back to the old one, not after everything. This one was smaller, but in a better neighborhood, in a building with 24-hour security. Sophie stopped at the door of the room we had prepared for her, looking around with cautious eyes. We had painted the walls her favorite shade of blue, bought new furniture, filled the shelves with books we thought she'd like. Is it mine? She asked softly. All yours, baby. She entered slowly, touching things as if afraid they would disappear. When she got to the new bed with its blue and white comforter, she finally let out a small laugh. It's so much better than my old room. You deserve it, Marcus said from the door. You deserve this, and so much more. That first night in the new apartment was difficult. Sophie had 3 nightmares, waking up screaming each time. Marcus and I took turns sitting with her, holding her hand, promising she was safe. Where are you going to sleep? She asked around 3 a.m, after the 3rd nightmare. I have the room next to yours, I said, and your father will stay on the couch for now. No, she squeezed my hand. Can you both stay here? Just for tonight? So Marcus and I spent the night in chairs beside Sophie's bed, 2 ex-spouses united only by their love for this broken girl, who was desperately trying to feel safe again. The next morning, Marcus had to return to Miami temporarily to organize his transfer. He promised to return in a week, and surprisingly, I believed him. Almost losing Sophie had changed something in him too. I started my leave from work. My boss wasn't happy, but he also couldn't refuse given the circumstances. The promotion would be postponed, he informed with clear displeasure. I didn't even care. To hell with the promotion. Sophie and I established a routine. Breakfast together, then therapy 3 times a week with Dr. Helena. In the afternoons, we did simple things. Watched movies, cooked together, did crafts. I had bought all the painting materials I could find, remembering that Sophie used to love drawing before all this happened. But she looked at the paints and papers with indifference. I don't feel like it, she always said. That's okay, I'd respond. They're here when you want them. A week after discharge, Detective Cardoso visited us with updates. My parents had been formally charged. Their bail was denied due to flight risk. The trial was scheduled for 3 months from now. And Graciela? I asked. Still at large, but we found more victims. Cardoso opened her laptop, showing a spreadsheet. So far, we've identified 12 children in 6 different states over 15 years. Always the same pattern. She approaches single parents, usually mothers, offers help, gains trust. Then the abuse begins. 12 children, I repeated, feeling nauseous. How did no one stop her before? She's smart, always moves before deep investigations begin, uses well-constructed false identities. And unfortunately, our system has flaws. Information isn't well shared between states. Cases archived when suspects disappear. Children who are afraid to speak. Cardoso closed the laptop. But now we have a federal case. Federal resources. We won't let her escape this time. After Cardoso left, I found Sophie in her room, looking out the window. Are you okay? I asked. 12 children, she said without turning. 12 like me, that she hurt and got away with. Not this time. But what if she stays away forever? What if they never catch her? Sophie finally looked at me, and there was something new in her eyes. Anger. What if she just starts over somewhere else, with another child? I had no answer for that, because she was right. As long as Graciela was free, she was a threat. The next day, Sophie asked to go back to school. I was reluctant. She had missed almost 3 weeks, was still recovering, still had intensive therapy. But Dr. Helena said returning to normalcy could be good for her. Just half days initially, the psychologist suggested. And with the school aware of the situation so they can provide appropriate support. I had a meeting with the principal, the educational counselor, and Sophie's main teacher. I explained the basics, that my daughter had suffered abuse, that she was recovering, that we would need patience and understanding. The principal, a serious woman named Marcia Silva, was direct. We have protocols for situations like this. Sophie can use the counseling room whenever she needs a safe space. Her teachers will be discreetly informed. And if there's any problem, bullying, inappropriate curiosity from other students, we'll intervene immediately. The first day back at school was tense. I took Sophie to the front door, where she hesitated, her eyes scanning the courtyard full of chattering and laughing teenagers. "I don't know if I can do it," she whispered. "You can. But if it gets too hard, just call and I'll pick you up. No questions, no judgment. Okay?" She nodded, took a deep breath, and went in. The next 3 hours were pure agony. I stayed in the apartment with my cell phone in hand, jumping at every notification, waiting for the call saying she couldn't handle it. The call never came. When I picked her up at noon, Sophie was waiting in front of the school with a girl I didn't know. They were laughing at something on their phone. "Mom!" Sophie waved. "This is Carolina. She's in my science class." Carolina was a tiny girl with braces and curly hair pulled into 2 buns. "Hi, Mrs. Moreno," she said cheerfully. Sophie was showing me some hilarious memes. In the car, after dropping Carolina off, Sophie was more animated than I'd seen her in weeks. "It was good," she said. "Strange, but good. People were nice. No one stared or asked stupid questions. That's great, baby. Carolina is funny. She wants to know if I can go to her house on Saturday to do a science project." My instinct was to say no. Keep her close, safe, where I could see her. But Sophie needed normalcy, friendships, life beyond trauma. "Let me talk to her parents first, okay?" Sophie rolled her eyes, but was smiling. "Are you going to meet all my friends' parents now?" "Absolutely." And that's how the weeks began to pass. Slowly, painfully, slowly. But they passed. Sophie returned to school full-time, made friends with Carolina, and a small group of other students who accepted her without asking too many questions. Started smiling more, but the scars remained. She jumped at loud noises, avoided being touched unexpectedly, had elaborate rituals before bed, checking all doors and windows, making sure no one was in the apartment, turning on a nightlight even though she said it was childish. And she still didn't paint. The art materials remained untouched in the corner of the room. Marcus returned at the end of January, having finalized his transfer. He rented an apartment a few blocks from ours and started having Sophie on alternate weekends. She was reluctant at first, but he was patient, letting her set the pace. "Thank you," he told me one night when he came to pick up Sophie, "for giving me another chance with her." "It's not for you," I responded honestly. "It's for her. She deserves to have 2 present parents." "Even so, I know I screwed everything up. I'm trying to fix it." At the end of February, 2 months after that terrible night, Dr. Helena asked to speak with me alone after one of her sessions with Sophie. "She's progressing well," the psychologist began. "Better than many children in this situation. But there's something that worries her." "What?" "Other victims. The other children your sister hurt." "Doctor." Helena adjusted her glasses. "Sophie feels responsible somehow, as if by not having spoken earlier, she allowed Graciela to continue hurting others. But she was a child. She was being manipulated and threatened. I know, you know, but Sophie is 13 years old. For her, logic doesn't overcome emotion so easily." Dr. Helena leaned forward. She mentioned wanting to do something to help. Maybe talk to other victims, or participate in some organization that prevents child abuse. She's not ready for that. Maybe not. But when she is, it could be therapeutic. Transforming trauma into purpose can be powerful in recovery. I thought about that later that night, watching Sophie do homework at the living room table. My daughter, who had survived the unthinkable, who was still struggling to overcome nightmares and fears. wanting to help other children like her. She had such a big heart. How had I not seen this before? "Sophie?" I called. She looked up from her math notebook. I love you. You know that, right?" She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I know. Mom, I love you too." It was small moments like these that kept my sanity. That reminded me why we were fighting, why we couldn't give up. But at night, when Sophie finally slept and I was alone with my thoughts, Graciella's words came back to haunt me. "You brought the monster into the house." And the worst part was she was right. Graciella was captured in April, 4 months after that night. She was in Recife, using the name Laura Silveira, working as a nanny for a family with 2 small children. One of the mothers from the school where she picked up the children recognized her face from a wanted poster that the police had spread throughout the country. Detective Cardoso called me personally. "We got her. She's in federal custody. No right to bail." The trial begins in 2 months. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried with relief. Sophie was at school when I received the news. When I picked her up, she immediately noticed something had happened. "They caught her, didn't they?" was all she asked. "Yes, baby. They caught her." Sophie didn't cry. She just nodded and looked out the car window. "Good," she said softly. "Now she can't hurt anyone else." The trial was in June. Sophie didn't need to testify in person. Her recorded testimony with Dr. Helena was used as evidence, but she wanted to be there, wanted to see. The courtroom was packed. Other victims had come, now young adults, to finally confront the woman who had destroyed their childhoods. Parents who had been manipulated just like me sat in the galleries with expressions of anger and pain. Graciella entered wearing a discreet gray suit, hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She looked like a teacher, a loving aunt, someone completely normal. It was terrifying how she could look innocent. For 4 days, we heard testimonies. Doctors describing injuries, social workers explaining patterns of abuse, other victims telling stories horribly similar to Sophie's. My parents testified, trying to minimize their role. My mother cried, saying she just wanted to help her daughter, that she didn't know it was so serious. My father remained silent, eyes lowered. The prosecutor destroyed their claims with emails, bank transfers, testimonies proving they knew exactly what Graciella did, and helped her escape repeatedly. Graciella showed no emotion during any of the testimonies. She sat upright, face neutral, as if watching a boring TV show, until Sophie entered the courtroom. My daughter had asked to make a victim impact statement. Dr. Helena had worked with her for weeks, helping her process what she wanted to say. I was terrified, but Sophie was determined. She walked up to the witness stand with firm steps, wearing a blue dress we bought especially for the occasion. She stood looking directly at Graciella. "You almost killed me," Sophie began, her voice clear and firm. "Not just my body, but my spirit. You made me believe I was worthless, that I deserved pain, that no one cared about me." Graciella finally looked back at her, and for a brief moment, I saw something pass across her face. Not regret, never that, but perhaps recognition that she had underestimated this child. "But you failed," Sophie continued, "because I survived. And unlike you, I learned what it really means to care about someone. I learned that love isn't control, that discipline isn't abuse, that family isn't who hurts you and says it's for your own good." Tears were starting to run down Sophie's face, but her voice remained strong. "You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and I'll spend the rest of mine learning to be happy, to trust, to love. I'll live a full life despite you, and that's my revenge, that you couldn't break me completely." The courtroom was in absolute silence when Sophie finished. She stepped down from the stand and returned to sit between me and Marcus, who held her hand. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. The sentence came 2 weeks later. Graciella received 45 years in prison without possibility of parole for 30 years. At 52 years old, this meant she would probably die behind bars. My parents received 12 years each as accomplices. The judge was particularly harsh in her remarks, saying that parents who allow and facilitate child abuse deserve severe punishment. When they took Graciella out of the courtroom, handcuffed, she looked at me one last time and smiled. But this time, I smiled back, because Sophie was by my side, alive, strong, healing. And Graciela was going to the only place where she could never hurt a child again. This wasn't just justice. It was victory. 2 years later, Sophie and I were in the kitchen of our apartment making cookies for a fundraiser. She was 15 now, taller, more confident. The nightmares still came occasionally, but less frequently. "Mom, look at this," she said, showing her tablet. It was an article about a new law being proposed, requiring more rigorous background checks for people working with children and better information sharing between states about abuse cases. "One of Graciela's other victims is leading the campaign," Sophie explained. "Carolina thinks we should help." Carolina had become Sophie's best friend, a constant and comforting presence in her life. And yes, I had met her parents extensively before allowing any interaction. "Do you want to get involved?" I asked carefully. Sophie thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think so. Dr. Helena said transforming trauma into purpose can help. And if we can prevent another Graciela from hurting children, it's worth it, isn't it?" I looked at my daughter, this incredible person who had survived the unthinkable and chosen to use her pain to protect others. My heart swelled with pride. "It's worth it," I agreed. "Let's do this together." Marcus joined us in that campaign. He had become a present, consistent, involved father. Our relationship would never be romantic again, but we had built a solid partnership centered on Sophie. The law was approved a year later, nicknamed the Sophie Law, by the senator who sponsored it. My daughter was in the Senate gallery when it was voted on, and when it passed, she cried, but this time with joy. Graciela remained in prison. I received automatic notifications if she was transferred, or if there was any change in her status. She tried to contact me a few times through letters, but I burned them without reading. My parents were also serving their sentences. My mother wrote me once, a long letter trying to justify her actions. Blame Graciela, play victim. I sent it to my therapist. Yes, I was also in therapy, and never responded. Some relationships can't be fixed. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Sophie graduated high school with honors. She was accepted to several universities and chose one with an excellent child trauma psychology program. She wanted to be a child trauma therapist. "To help children like me," she explained, "to be the person who understands because I've been there." The day we took her to university, Marcus and I stood in her dorm helping her arrange things. Sophie was 18, a beautiful and resilient young woman who had transformed her worst experience into the foundation of who she wanted to be. "You guys can go," she said eventually, laughing at our reluctance to leave. "I'll be fine. I promise." And I believed her, because Sophie had repeatedly proven she was stronger than any trauma she had suffered. In the car driving home, Marcus spoke first. "We did it, didn't we? Despite everything. We raised an incredible person." "She raised herself," I corrected. "We just tried not to get in the way too much." He laughed, but then got serious. "Jennifer, thank you for letting me be a father again, for giving us this second chance. It wasn't about you," I said, but without the bitterness from before. "It was about her. But yes, you showed up, and that matters." I returned home, a different apartment now. Bigger, in a neighborhood Sophie had helped choose before going to college. There were no ghosts here, no terrible memories staining the walls. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and turned on the TV. The news was running a report about child abuse. Alarming statistics, the need for more protections. My phone rang. "Sophie. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to say goodnight. My roommate is nice. I think we're going to get along." "That's good, baby. I love you." "I love you too." "And Mom?" "Yes? Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For fighting for me. For not giving up, even when I had given up on myself." Tears burned my eyes. "Always, Sophie. Always." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the apartment, thinking about everything we had been through. Everything we had survived. Graciela had tried to destroy my daughter. My own family had betrayed me in ways I never imagined possible. But in the end, love had won. Resilience had won. Sophie was no longer that broken girl in the hospital hallway. She was a survivor, an advocate, a force of nature determined to make a difference. And I was no longer that mother who put work above everything, who missed important signs, who blindly trusted. We had both been transformed by fire. And although the scars remained, they reminded us not of our weakness, but of our strength. Graciela was behind bars, My parents were paying for their crimes, and we were free to live, to heal, to build futures that weren't defined by our worst day. This wasn't just justice. It was victory. Did you notice the pattern? Graciela didn't choose random victims. She studied. Single mothers, overwhelmed, with demanding jobs. Women who felt guilty about working so much. She offered herself as savior, gained trust, and then began. And the scariest part? She used the mother's own guilt as a weapon. You work too much. You're not present. The girl needs discipline. She turned Jennifer's biggest fear, being an absent mother, into justification for torturing Sophie. 12 children in 15 years. 4 different identities. And always the same script. Appear, help, abuse, disappear. She was a machine for creating trauma. But you know what broke the cycle? A paramedic who paid attention. A mother who finally believed. And a girl who refused to be broken. The lesson here is clear. Predators count on our blind trust in family. They count on our fear of seeming paranoid. They count on children who are too afraid to speak. Don't give them that advantage. Thanks for watching until here. If this story grabbed you in any way, leave your like and follow the channel so you don't miss the next ones. There are always original stories here about choices, consequences, and moments that change an entire life. And now I want to hear from you. What story theme would you like to see here? Your suggestion could be the next one.